What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you'll never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, April 24th, 2017. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Mike is in our control room. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And getting right on into it, up at the top of my website, I have a graphic, which I think tells us where we are today. And it's a photo of President John F. Kennedy, along with a quote that he used to make on a regular basis. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. And as much as it pains me to say it, we seem to have reached that point because we tried to bring about a peaceful change in this country last year, and it just didn't help. We're still on a path to war. We're still on a path to corporate corruption and fascism. The corporate media is still lying to us left and right. China has already come on out and dismissed the report that their bombers were on high alert to counter North Korea. They're saying, no, it never happened. Russia has also come on out saying the report that they deployed all these 100,000 troops to the border, that has no basis in fact. And you know those riots over in Berkeley that the corporate media told you were all about Donald Trump's tax return? And they said it really didn't seem to make a lot of sense. And as it turns out, it didn't. The riots were actually a demonstration about freedom of speech and the universities canceling certain speakers that they don't want the students to be exposed to. And that's what it was. And the media is just out there, oh, it's just Trump's tax return. Nothing to see here, people. Now, on that same level, last week there was a story that every time Donald Trump dropped another bomb, his approval ratings went through the roof, and nobody was buying that. And late last week we started seeing a lot of polls come out from a lot more trustworthy sources, meaning the ones who weren't predicting a Hillary sweep last year. And Donald Trump's numbers are not at all good. In fact, there's a story that came out of Politico saying that Donald Trump's disapproval rating is 53%, higher than any president before him since polls began tracking. In other words, he is more disapproved of at this stage of his administration than any previous president at the same point. So Donald Trump already knows why his poll numbers are not doing well. It's the fake media. It's the fake media. They're the ones who are harming his poll numbers here. And if anybody from the White House is listening to this, and I'm pretty sure you are, Trump's low approval rating is because he is not keeping his most important promises to the American people, including an end to foreign interventions. Trump's economic policy so far appears to cater to the already rich while not improving life for the vast majority of people who voted for him. Donald Trump may be our first transgender president because he's turning into Hillary day by day. Donald Trump's policies are like the weather here in Hawaii. If you don't like it, just wait 15 minutes. It's going to change. Another interesting story, despite the loss of confidence, the disenchantment with President Trump, if November's election were reheld again today, Hillary Clinton would still lose. That's how disliked she is. But in the end result, we had an election that didn't change anything. And that's very discouraging because those of us who worked to support Trump, or at least to keep Hillary out of the White House, did so in the hope we would bring about change to this country, head off this suicidal rush toward war. And if it sounds like I'm a little upset, I am. I'm a little discouraged right now because for the last 23 years, Claire and I have really paid a price for trying to get the truth out there and change things peacefully. And I keep thinking about that statement by John Kennedy. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. We may already be seeing it up at Berkeley, some of the other riots. And I don't want to see a revolution or a civil war in this country. But it is very discouraging. And you have to look in the mirror and say, was it all worth it? Last November when Trump won, I would have said, yeah, it was worth it. All the hardship, the doing without would be worth it. Now, I don't know. I don't think so anymore. Now, the Trump dossier has taken another credibility hit. As you're probably aware, the dossier had a lot of problems. The newest one is one of the people named as a Russian agent in that dossier. This is the one with Trump and the prostitutes and everything else. Apparently, one of the Russians named in there actually is in prison right now and has been for quite some time and was simply unavailable to be doing what the dossier claims that he was doing. But we know we're being lied to again. We're always being lied to again. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Obviously, the big news is the French presidential election, the first round results. Macron got 24.01%, Le Pen 21.3%, so both of them are proceeding to round two, which will happen in 2 weeks' time. And what's really interesting is all of the so-called mainstream parties were eliminated in round one. The currently ruling Socialist Party finished in 5th place. So that was a little bit of an embarrassment. Now, Marine Le Pen, in her victory speech, was out there saying the survival of France is at stake in the second round, talking about all of the mass migration and all the problems it's caused. Now, Macron came out with a speech because technically they both won. Nigel Farage is out there saying that Macron's speech was vacuous nonsense. Other than backing the status quo, he's saying nothing original at all. Now, Nigel Farage, aware that his last election, he was a victim of election fraud himself, may run again in the upcoming general election in June. So he's going to try that. Now, what's really interesting are some of the reactions by the globalists in France, because Daniel Dolomes, who's the mayor of Anazin in the Pas-de-Calais commune of northern France, just lost it because Marine Le Pen got 38% of the votes in the region. And he's out there saying, I'm going to resign because I'm not going to dedicate my life to taking care of a bunch of, and he used a profanity there that I cannot use here on the radio. So everyone's crying, and the big question is, where are the voters who voted for the other parties, the other candidates, in particular Fillon, where are they going to switch to in round two? So we'll see what's happening there. Interestingly enough, in part of all this Russia-phobia, the Russia Today news crew was blocked from the Macron headquarters, even though they had been granted they'd been promised press credentials. Now, for some reason, while the reporters were kept out, the RT's video crew did, in fact, get on in there. So everybody's kind of venting their anger and their Russophobia. And, of course, the Muslims protested the first round of elections by doing what they do best, setting cars on fire in Paris, which only vindicates those who are supporting Marine Le Pen. Now, not too long ago, everybody was kind of surprised by the announcement from Republican Representative Jason Chaffetz of Utah that he would not run again for his seat next year. Now, he's in this very powerful position as chairman of the House Oversight and Reform Committee. And everybody was saying, what's going on? Is he being pressured? Well, apparently Circa News is out there with a story that an investigation Chaffetz had conducted over the tragic shoot-down of a mission called Extortion 17 was part of an elaborate government cover-up, itself criminal in nature. Chaffetz remains as chairman, his own committee would have to investigate and likely take action against him. So that may be why he's getting out of town while the getting is good. Maxine Waters apparently paid her own daughter nearly $650,000 from campaign funds. And apparently the daughter is in charge of running this lucrative campaign operation that pulls in hundreds of thousands of dollars each election cycle. And she's being paid out of those funds. Now, here's an interesting little question. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo wrote a book, and he had a wonderful book deal. And according to the records, he has made $783,000 in royalties. Sounds like a good book. Actually, it only sold 3,200 copies. So that works out to a royalty payment of $245 per copy. So something is going on there. It's a little weird. I think book deals are sort of a legalized form of political payoff. Now, last week, the OPCW was out there saying they were pretty sure that it was Assad up in Idlib, pretty sure he used sarin. Then we find out that the UN inspectors are being blocked from the site by the United States. So we ask the question of how could they know one way or the other, especially given the two previous times the U.S. government accused Assad of chemical weapons in 2013 and 2014, both of which turned out to be the U.S.-backed rebels. Well, now the United Nations has backed off the claim about Idlib, and they're saying they're unable to decide who's behind the attack. So they're not taking a side on this thing anymore. It all comes down to, do you trust the word of the U.S. government and the corporate media? And again, the story just never made any sense. And we reposted the Corbett Report video that just lays out what a ridiculously nonsensical piece of propaganda this claim was, that Assad gassed his own people. He had no reason to do it. He had nothing to gain and everything to lose. And along that line, there's another article, this is from the American Conservative, talking about apparently there is a growing, shall we say, revolution among retired and current intelligence employees who are saying the Syria story does not make any sense. And they're very, very upset because everybody knows it's a lie, and the further along the government pushes the lie, the more it makes them all look like they're evil, they're complicit. And there's word now that some people may be starting to blow whistles because they think this has gone on far enough, and it certainly has. Meanwhile, over in western Aleppo, the terrorists who are battling with the Syrian army have somehow managed to get their hands on U.S.-made missiles, in particular the U.S.-made anti-tank tow missile. Funny how that happens. I thought the terrorists were our enemies in the war on terror, and they're getting all these U.S. weapons. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. George in Texas. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, happy Monday, Mike. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
I kind of noticed something strange on Facebook. They had this text such and such number to oppose against the new proposed constitutional carry law in Texas, where you don't need a permit or nothing to conceal or open carry. No more permits. Well, I kind of noticed something. People who were for Texas open carry, their comments are being struck. But yet all the people who wanted the permits and were against this proposed legislation were allowed to stay on. And Facebook is censoring.
Yes, we know that. And, if they aren't able to get this thing politically or get a petition or whatever, then we can expect a false flag school shooting or mall shooting or something like that, where they find some patsy whose brain is melted on prescription antidepressants, load him up with some guns and say, go have fun. Because that's how they're trying to push back on that Second Amendment.
Well, I kind of noticed, I went to one of the community colleges where they had a pro-liberty rally. It wasn't a pro-Trump, it was a pro-liberty rally. And Antifa came out, and guess what? The cops made them take their masks off.
Yeah, and what's interesting is the law they're using was actually originally created for the KKK. Get them to take those hoods off.
No, but actually in Texas and in Florida, it's against the law to wear a ski mask. So,
unless you're skiing.
But, yeah, which I don't think there's no skiing in Florida or Texas.
Okay.
But anyway, I just wanted to point that out, that yes, since the other side cannot win on its merits, it has to cheat.
That's right.
Have a good day, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now, again, back in Syria, the Syrian air defense units spotted a U.S. spy drone flying over Latakia province's airspace, and they shot it down. And what's really interesting is the Western media is out there trying to really hammer the fact it was a Russian-made missile. Oh, those evil Russians. They are helping the Syrians shoot down our spy drones. We need those spy drones to figure out where to bomb the next time. And so this thing is ramping up. And technically we're seeing U.S. hardware directly engaging Russian hardware, and the Russian hardware is winning. Israel has been carrying out attacks on military camps inside Syria. They killed 3 more on a camp near the southwestern city of Quneitra. And so Israel's wading right on in. Israel has issued a warning to Syria not to shoot at Israeli planes bombing Syria, or they will destroy the Syrian air defense system. Do you love the chutzpah on that one? How dare you try and shoot down our planes while they're bombing you? That's sort of normally what you do to warplanes that come into your country and drop high explosives. Now, interestingly enough, a former Israeli defense minister, Bogi Yalan, who served as defense minister until he had a falling out with Netanyahu, and he's forming his own party. He's going to run against Netanyahu, and he's gone public saying, yes, Israel collaborates with ISIS in Syria. A lot of people have written in emails saying, why don't we ever see ISIS attack Israel? Are they linked up? Yeah, maybe, and now we got a confirmation from Israel's former defense minister saying, yes, Israel collaborates with ISIS in Syria. So we posted a flashback article from 2012 about how the Israel lobby has been pushing for U.S. action against the Syrian government to weaken Iran. And yes, that is pretty much how far back the war goes. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Mark in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing there, Mike?
Doing
Mike,
fine.
I don't know if I ever told you, but I was born Jewish.
Okay.
I don't practice religion, but, you know, the fact of the matter is, I guess, racially or whatever else, you could say I'm Jewish, okay? But I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm disgusted, fed up with Israel. I don't understand why the United States keeps on supporting it. Well, I do understand, but it's not right. And as far as what they're doing now in Syria, the Israelis, I don't know how long Russia's going to allow this to happen. And they don't start shooting down these Israeli jets. We even start attacking Israeli airfields. So this is just going too far. And I don't think the American people in the long run are going to want to go to war, possibly World War III for Israel, because especially when Israel starts all this stuff.
The American people don't want to go to World War III for anybody. The reason and who doesn't even matter anymore. We are a war-weary people. We've been at war constantly since 2003, and everybody is just sick and tired of it all.
Yeah, well, we know the consequences, too, of what a World War III would be. And it wouldn't be, and probably might be the extinction of mankind, or at least most of mankind.
Yes.
I mean, so how long, I'm just asking, how long is, for instance, Russia going to allow this to happen? Syria is their ally. They know that Assad is not the evil man they're made out to be. He's a very good man. If anybody's evil, it's Netanyahu, who I think is, the guy is absolutely disgusting. And you know what else disgusts me? I understand Kushner's father had Netanyahu as a house guest, and there's Kushner sitting in the middle of the White House.
Yes.
It's got to be stopped. People got to start demanding. I like what you said about Trump being the first transgender president. That's a good one.
Okay.
Because he's turning into Hillary.
Yes.
That's great. I mean, it's time. Like I said, I'm not a Zionist. I love America. This is my country, and I want this country to do the best for its people. I don't want to be ashamed of this country. I don't want this country involved in war crimes. I don't want this country helping rogue nations that are out there doing things that.
What the problem is here is the U.S. government is treating the American people just like they treat the people in all these other conquered, regime-changed nations. And that's something to think about. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Mark. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take a phone call. Laura in Michigan. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hi. I was going to say, yesterday on the Freedom Party show, It's a 3-hour show. They had Phil Turney, USS Liberty survivor, on for 3 hours. Anyway, let's go to the archives. It was an excellent show. Well, James Kelso, while Phil was on the show, went to Wikipedia to see what they said about the USS Liberty. And guess what it says? Talk about fake. It says USS Liberty, friendly fire incident.
Well, doesn't sound like it was all that friendly to me. And again, we know that the online resources, the large corporate-based ones, are being co-opted to rewrite history. And it certainly was not a friendly fire incident. I mean, if you look at the ship Israel claimed they thought it was, this Egyptian horse carrier, the two are completely different. For one thing, horse carriers don't have large dish antennas all over the top of them. In any event, they've interviewed some of the pilots who said they knew they were firing on an American ship. That was their orders. And if you go to the Cryptologic Museum in Washington, D.C., they have the flag from the USS Liberty on display there with the Israeli cannon shell holes still in it. So they obviously had to see they were firing on an American flag.
And Israel took one of the life rafts. The torpedo boat grabbed the life raft. It's now in an Israeli museum on display, which just makes me so irritated.
Yeah, plus the fact that that machine gunning the life rafts, that's a war crime right there. They clearly did not intend for anybody to survive.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. I don't know if you saw Sean Hannity last week, Thursday and Friday. He was on a tour of Israel, and it was horrible. Telling how bad the Palestinians were. Netanyahu was talking about how small their country was, only as big as New Jersey. And then Hannity took them, went on a helicopter flight, and they were showing, oh, gee, there's Syria, and there's Iran, and there's Lebanon. Showing them the greater Israel, how they could have expand. That's what they're showing.
Yeah.
Expanding the Israel, because they're only the size of New Jersey. They need more room.
Boy, it's amazing how a country that small can cause so much trouble.
Exactly, exactly. But if anybody gets the archive of it Thursday and Friday, you'd really be upset, all the things that were said. Sean Hannity was looking at Netanyahu with fawning eyes. Oh, he was just so intrigued with Netanyahu.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we'll look it up there. But yeah, I mean, the corporate media is completely co-opted, and you have to wonder how Israel exerts this kind of power over our country. But there's no question that they do. We have a puppet regime in Washington, D.C., and we shouldn't be any more tolerant of it than the citizens of Iraq or Afghanistan or Libya or Yemen or any of the other places the U.S. has done this to.
Well, because the Federal Reserve, they've got all the money. I mean, look at that guy in Georgia, a young fella. He's a Jewish fella. He all of a sudden was able to raise $8.5 million. Boom.
Yep.
Where do you think all that money came from?
Out of thin air, like most of it, and yeah, because as long what was it that Rothschild said? Allow me to control the issuance of currency, and I care not who makes the laws. And that really lies at the heart of the fact that we don't have a democracy. We're living under fascism, where the money controls all aspects of our lives.
One other thing I was going to say real quick.
Yes.
Parker Pathways, you know Russia's been flying over near Alaska?
Yes.
He said they're really taking radiation readings. It's not anything nefarious. But he also said, and I can't confirm this, that Obama had given Russia 4 of the Aleutian Islands for their own. So they might be flying over their own islands.
I'll have to double check on that, but again, look at a globe of the Earth and see how close Russia and Alaska are. I mean, after all, Sarah Palin can see Russia from her front porch. It's kind of hard for Russia to not be flying close to Alaska when they're in the Bering Straits. We have to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, Laura, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go right to the phones. We've got John Lamb from Las Vegas. with an update on the Bundy Ranch trial. John, what's the latest?
Hello, sir. Yeah, I'm down here still in front of the courthouse. We just got back out of the courtroom, and this trial has been declared a mistrial. We're still in the dark a little bit because this morning, the first thing, right about 10 o'clock, the jurors said they had a partial verdict, and we all went up in the courtroom, and they found one defendant guilty on 8 charges. That was Greg Burleson. He was the former FBI informant that had been declared in this case. And he got found on 8 charges. And then Todd Engel from northern Idaho, they found him guilty on 2 of the charges. And the rest they were hung on. The jurors could not come back with an answer. The judge asked them to go deliberate a little bit longer to see if they could. They came back a couple hours later and said they still could not come up with any more verdicts. They were hung on all the remaining charges. So the judge declared it a mistrial. She has set a new trial date for these defendants already for June 26th. So it's been a long, hard 9 weeks here in trial for all of us. We've got people coming from all over the country that have supported and helped in so many ways. And I've been here pretty much from day one, reporting on this trial and giving support to the defendants and their families, visiting guys in jail. And it's a sad day today that this is where it came to, and we got to have a new trial all over again. But we are thankful that we didn't come back with guilty verdicts more than we did.
Well, I would suggest at this point that if enough of the public makes noise about this, the prosecutors may decide not to retry, because this has turned into a huge embarrassment for them. Pretty much everybody who's looked very closely at the case knows the the Bureau of Land Management overstepped its authority, and they may decide to just drop the matter and let it go away rather than have more adverse publicity. At least that would be the common sense thing to do. But, of course, there doesn't seem to be a lot of common sense within our government. What's going on about the snipers? Are they still there?
We had, they're not here now. We had an extraordinary amount of law enforcement here. There was over 30 officers, or actually Homeland Security and U.S. Marshals in the courtroom, another couple dozen outside the courtroom. Then we had Metro PD. And we counted at least 30 plus that were visible to us. Then they had snipers circling in helicopters and around the courthouse today with all the supporters. This kind of action shows who's the aggressor. We have never been the aggressor. These defendants even weren't. And their presence in doing that just on a verdict day is unspeakable that this would happen on U.S. soil. And these guys would arm up and put snipers on people just observing courts. It's a shame that this is happening on American soil.
Well, I hope somebody got pictures and video of it, because it needs to go all over the independent media that this is how the government behaves when things aren't going their way in the legal system. And it's kind of interesting for the judge to declare a mistrial. Because it sounds to me like they're just thinking about just retrying and retrying and retrying until they get the verdicts they want.
Exactly, and that's one of the things we don't understand just yet. We're trying to wrap this around, and the attorneys are trying to figure out. The judge declared that the guilty verdicts will stick, but the other charges that the jurors couldn't make a decision on were mistrial only on those verdicts, which we know that's not how it goes. When you declare a case a mistrial, everything is a mistrial. And she's saying that she's only going to declare the hung part of the case a mistrial and not the guilty verdict. And that's something we're going to have to fight the next couple of weeks in some court hearings and paperwork with these lawyers and try to decipher that and try to see how they can do that. That's totally wrong.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like it. All right, well, listen, John, thanks an awful lot for the update. Feel free to call back in with any new information. And again, if you have photos or videos of that very intense military, for lack of a better word, presence around the court observers during the trial today, I would love to see it and post it.
Yes, we will get some of those out for you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good luck, and give my best to the Bundys. All right, so there's John Lamb, and basically the upshot of it is only 2 people were found guilty by the jury, one of them being an FBI informant. The others, the juries could not reach a verdict, and the judge has taken the unusual step of saying the guilty verdicts will stick, but for all the verdicts where the jury could not find the defendants guilty, they're a mistrial, which means they can be tried again and again and again, however long it takes for the government to get the result that they want. So that's kind of where we are on that. Now, getting back to the international news, apparently Reuters quoted Norbert Röttgen, head of Germany's Parliamentary Foreign Affairs Committee, as saying Israel right now is benefiting from all this tension around the world, North Korea, Syria, Yemen, and Libya, because it's distracting the world from what Israel is doing in Palestine. And we know that this is a classic pattern for Israel. Anytime there's a major event somewhere else in the world, they uncork on the Palestinians again. We reported on this last week, but it's worth mentioning again from Blacklisted News. Secretary of Defense James Mattis is saying the U.S. will increase its involvement in the Saudi-led war in Yemen, a war that has claimed the lives of 4,000 civilians in 2 years and drawn international criticism for war crimes committed by the Saudis. Now, the misstatement in there is this claim that this is Saudi-led. No, it is not. Saudi Arabia is acting as a proxy for the United States because the U.S. government understands we're all sick and tired of these wars. And they're having a hard time selling them more and more. So they gave the Saudis the task of going on in and slapping Yemen down because Yemen was successfully regime changed some years ago, and then all of a sudden the people of Yemen decided they didn't like living under a U.S. puppet ruler, and they kicked the U.S. puppet ruler out. So this Saudi invasion at the behest of the United States is all about teaching these conquered provinces that once you are conquered, you will stay conquered. And that's what's really going on. But now they're talking because Saudi Arabia has been unable to prevail in Yemen. The U.S. is going to directly send forces in. So we've got yet another war going on. All right, let's take a phone call. Kathleen from Paris. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Yes, I wanted to check in so that you would know that I was not caught in the crossfire of feuding, protesting people here.
Good. I am glad.
And I wanted to tell you a little bit about this guy, Macron.
Yes.
This is how the French people say it. Looks like Macron to us, but Macron. And I saw a piece today about him, and that says that he seems to have come out of the ether. And his main thing that anybody can really know for sure about him is he was a partner in a Rothschild bank.
Mm-hmm.
Big red flag there.
Yes.
And a strange thing about him is that when he was 15 years old, he met his wife, his future wife, who was his teacher. He was 15 in the high school, and so his current wife is 25 years older than him.
Yeah, I was on the Richie Allen show earlier today, and they brought that up as a talking point.
Yeah, and there's just not that much to say about it. It's just that this piece that I saw seemed to think that he was groomed or somehow for just where he is now, because there's not really much known about him except that being very quickly, when he was quite young, a partner in the Rothschild Bank. And, that doesn't just happen to a young man. Anyway, back to another thing I wanted to say was somebody last week made a plug for supporting your show.
Yes.
And I would like to do that too, and I've been trying to figure out, just on my budget what I can do. And my way of figuring out my donation is that I watch your show every day, and sometimes twice. Sometimes I watch it at night like I am now and listen to the commercials, and then I watch it again the next day without the commercials. But for me, it's an education. It's I'm sure that watching your show for a year is worth, a university diploma. So I decided I could afford $1 per show.
Okay.
And you do 5 shows a week.
Yes.
And there's 52 weeks, and that's how I calculated my donation. And I wanted to just propose that for other people so they can. I don't know. Sometimes you think, well, what should I give? And just if they figure that there's 260 days that you give us a live show, then they can calculate on their budget what they can afford.
Well, basically I leave it up to the individual donors. Some can donate a lot, and some do donate a lot. Most are on very tight budgets because the economy is so terrible, and they can only send in $5 or $10, but it's all appreciated here. I know. Claire and I have been living one disaster away from homelessness for so long. It's become a permanent lifestyle, and I keep hoping that I'm going to have a very rich relative pass on, and then I remember that I actually don't have any very rich relatives, so that idea is not going to work on out.
Yes. Well, yeah, I know what you're saying, and I had personal experience. One time I moved, and I spent all of my money to get to my destination. And so, I figured out how people, basically good people, can get homeless. You spend all your money to get somewhere, and then you realize you lose your job, or you realize that, you can't afford the rent.
That happens here in Hawaii an awful lot. And it's so expensive to get from Hawaii anywhere else. A lot of people get trapped here. I keep joking with Claire that we've become Hawaiian sourdoughs. We're sour on Hawaii, but we don't have the dough to leave. Kathleen, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I've got a call that just came in I've been waiting for. And please call in again. Merci. And we're going to talk to Fabian in Sweden. Fabian, please bring us up to date on what's going on with independent media, citizen journalism over there in the country with the world's first feminist government.
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much for taking me on to your show. I'm a great admirer of you, and I've been listening to you for a number of years, and this is my first time calling in. And thank you very much for having me on. We are a number of people in Sweden who go undercover as journalists, and we call ourselves Granskning Sverige, which translates into Review Sweden. And you can get to our homepage by typing www.reviewsweden.com, and that will take you to our Swedish webpage. We have a bit of English in there for international viewers. But what we do, we call journalists and politicians as normal citizens, but we do record them when we talk to them. And then we ask them the questions that the mainstream media does not. And that usually puts them in a very awkward position, which very often ends up with them just hanging up on us. And then we publish that on YouTube, and people realize that they've been lied to, because a lot of people in Sweden are very politically correct because they've been brainwashed for so long by mainstream media. But then when we ask questions that are kind of outside the box, then they realize, I haven't thought about that. Why doesn't he answer to this? And our core issue is pretty much that, do Swedish people exist as an ethnic cultural group or not? And if you are a Swedish politician, should you not be looking after the Swedish people rather than all other people? And if we have limitless immigration into Sweden, what will happen to the Swedish people? And that's kind of what it boils down to all the time when you call someone about some stupid new politically correct decision, like, for instance, making laws, making it that communities have to give housing to new immigrants.
Yes.
So we have now laws in Sweden that demands that the local communities provide housing for people who just arrived, while there are Swedes who cannot move out from their homes. I mean, young Swedes who doesn't have the money to buy an apartment. And the city councils are even going out on the house market and the apartment market, buying houses and apartments. So the Swedish people is out-conquering themselves on the house market, on the apartment market, by the tax money that we give to the local community, and the local community goes out on the market and competes with the people who pay the tax. That's
amazing,
yeah.
and we're hearing all these other problems that are hitting not just Sweden but all over Europe from the out-of-control migration. Apparently, following last night's election results in France, the Muslims went on another riot in Paris, burning cars and everything. And by the way, I'm keeping a list of all those French celebrities who said they were going to leave France if Marine Le Pen made it to round 2, and so far they're not moving. But there's all the rape and the burglary and everything going on, and unfortunately the globalists they've hit the gas pedal because they realize there is a growing pushback of populism and nationalism that is impeding their plans for a one-world government.
Yeah, exactly. And I just want to give it to your listeners also that it is a very efficient way of exposing these people by calling them and asking them questions and recording it, because they are not used to answer that kind of questions. And this, anyway, we have done this undercover. We've been anonymous for like 2-3 years, but lately I personally was exposed by one of the mainstream newspapers in Sweden. And they came to my home and with a camera in my face and asked me questions. And the thing is...
Okay, Fabian, I'm going to have to put you on hold.
Yes.
We got to take a break for commercials. Do not hang up. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Fabian in Sweden, and you were talking about how the corporate media has now outed your identity in order to make you a target.
Exactly. They want to shut me up. And so the national newspaper Expressen came to my home and videotaped me, and then they made this propaganda piece. The thing is, I videotaped them as they came to me, so I had also the material. And when they left, I wondered, is this really news that they know my identity now? I was talking to my wife and thought that, I don't really think that's going to be anything really out of this. But the next day it was on the headlines in all over the place. So it was obviously very big news for them. The thing is that I videotaped the whole thing, the whole encounter, and I put it up on YouTube just 2 hours later. And I have now, I think it's 55,000 views on my video, and people are really angry with the mainstream media, what they've done. And the Expressen, they have also their video online. But they have 4,500 views, and they have been forced to shut their comment section because people were not very happy with what they've done. So it's kind of blown up in their face, which is really fantastic, I think.
Yeah, well, it's always good when we can get the media to humiliate themselves. But again, we're in an age right now where Facebook, YouTube, Google are openly engaging in censorship, which is why we're suggesting to other people that they go to some of these new startup social media platforms, which so far seem to be showing respect for the First Amendment. And that's Scene Life, VK, Diaspora, Gab. These are all working very well, and I'm getting lots and lots of followers on those platforms.
Yeah, I think we're going to try to get over to those. It's just that we're not that we're not that much into computers, so we are still on Facebook. We haven't been limited there yet, but we are aware that probably will happen in due time. But I just want to come to another thing there with my exposure, because we were first exposed as an organization. There was a journalist who posed as a volunteer and wanted to get into our organization, or what you call it. We're very few. We're just like 5-6 people. and he got into our website where we try to gather information and give each other ideas. And then he wrote this hit piece on us, and that was before they knew our identity. And that was all over the place. And then later I made a mistake, and then my personal identity was all over the place. But in this first exposure, we so to say, in quotation mark, exposed the organization. Even our Prime Minister and our Minister of Democracy felt they needed to comment on it. And our Minister of Democracy, well, I've got it on the web page. I got a quotation on the website. Do you want me to read it? It's really surreal.
Real quick, we're almost out of time.
Okay, journalists and journalism are the guardians of freedom, and if they are deprived of their possibilities to do their job due to hate or threats or because their journalism is questioned, then the guardians, the ones who are to defend our democracy, lost their power. So we're not allowed to question journalists, and that's what we do most of the time. We call journalists and ask, why do they not point to
Fabian, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for station identification. I did link to your website from whatreallyhappened.com. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are still open, 800-313-9443. Now then, very interesting article coming out of Sputnik News. The U.S. plan for the Middle East is to change the borders of 24 states. In other words, redraw the map of the Middle East to the U.S. and Israel's advantage. And remember, when the Ottoman Empire fell, much of the borders in the Middle East were created by Great Britain. Get out a map. These are the new lines. These are the new nations. Keep them small. Keep them fighting each other, and we can keep them under control. And that is a very ambitious agenda. And I'm sure the people in these countries do not want their borders redrawn. It only increases tension. Remember when they divided India into India and Pakistan? All the violence that happened? Because they had to move everybody around. Now, they're still pushing Russia connection, Russia connection, Russia connection. U.S. House Speaker Paul Ryan is out there saying that if we probe Russia's interference with our last election, it'll prevent the same kind of thing happening to NATO and its other allies, ignoring the fact that the U.S. has been caught intervening in some 80 other elections themselves, including an attempt to influence the French election. Now, no sooner had the results from the first round of French elections come on in, when somebody started a rumor that Francois Fillon had been cheated of the second place by Russian hackers. Oh, my goodness, they're Russian hackers. And even Fillon's campaign is saying, this is ridiculous. This is utter nonsense. So, we do have a very heavy-handed and thankfully quite obvious propaganda campaign against Russia. Article out of Zero Hedge, confronting Russophobia, and they're saying there's a paranoid, hysterical quality to the media discourse on Russia and all things Russian. And corporate media has abandoned reason, common decency. It's all about raw hate and fear-mongering. And it's worse today than it was during the darkest days of the Cold War. And I remember how heavy-handed the anti-Russia propaganda was back then, and it's worse today. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is saying that Russia's activities in eastern Ukraine an obstacle in Washington-Moscow ties. What is Russia doing in East Ukraine? Nobody's found them doing anything yet. All the photos that were presented as Russian tanks in eastern Ukraine all turned out to be taken other places, other times, or just outright fakes. But once again, start with a big lie, provoke a war. And I'm getting a strong sense that the war hawks, the people who want your children to be killed and crippled in World War III, are aware there is a growing pushback toward any more war. And so the lies are getting more fantastical, and they're accelerating the process. They're going to get them all going all at once. And that's another reason they're going to lose. Now, Russia's Foreign Minister Lavrov is out there saying Iran is ready for full membership in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So they're going to bring them on in, and Russia and China are already talking about a reverse of the Kennedy Doctrine. For those of you who don't remember what that is, in the lead-up to the Cuban Missile Crisis, John F. Kennedy went on TV and said, it is the policy of the United States that an attack on any nation in our hemisphere represents a direct attack on the United States itself and will be responded to. And we're starting to hear exactly the same thing coming back from the other side. No more of this picking off little helpless countries one bit at a time. They're starting to form allegiances, mutual defense pacts. And we're hearing very strong indications that Russia and China, without wanting to be provocative, are sending diplomatic messages saying that as far as they're concerned, the same thing applies to them. An attack on China is an attack on Russia. An attack on Russia is an attack on China. They're teaming up, and that is a formidable force that we're not going to be able to overcome. Now, over in North Korea, a third U.S. citizen has been arrested, remains in custody in North Korea. Very few details coming on out. Intelligence services in the U.S. and South Korea don't have any details. Now, this guy was a former professor at Yanbian University of Science and Technology, but so far there's no comment from the U.S. authorities. North Korea claims it's arresting foreign spies, which it very well may be doing. Up at the United Nations, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley is telling North Korea to get in line. She's warning Americans don't want war, so don't start one. Well, she's partially correct. The American people don't want the war. It's the government. It's the money junkies. It's the bankers. Another story, this one out of CNN. U.S. tells North Korea to cease destabilizing actions and rhetoric. I'm sorry, but who has their armada off of whose coast? Who is screaming all options are on the table? Who's been talking about invading North Korea for decades, since the armistice? North Korea is acquiring these weapons as a deterrent to what they see as an imminent U.S. invasion. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network, and we're going to take a phone call from James in Maui. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing? I've been listening to your show for a while. When it goes into that fallback mode on the mainland, it interferes with my schedule. So it's good to be back listening again.
Yes.
And I'm so disappointed already with all the warmongering.
I am too.
What have you?
I am too. It's like all that work for nothing. We didn't succeed in actually bringing any changes. I mean, there's some cosmetic things going on. But that's all it is. The really important issue of Trump ending the wars. In fact, somebody sent me a news clipping where Justin Raimondo wrote an op-ed that was published in the LA Times saying, I voted for Trump, I feel betrayed. And it starts right on off with Trump's campaigning on no more foreign interventions. And I'm feeling betrayed as well, because I don't think we can win this next world war.
Well, I don't think we can live through it, but that's beside the point.
Well, you know, the good thing about you being down on Maui is you'll watch the fireworks from far away. If we get into a shooting nuclear war with Russia and China, Oahu will be hit. There's no question about it. They'll hit Pearl Harbor.
Well, absolutely.
They'll hit Diamond Head.
We'll get the shockwave.
Sorry?
Shockwave over here, though. We'll get the shockwave from the nuclear blast.
If the Russians attack us, it won't be all that bad. If the Chinese hit Oahu, then yes, you'll get a shockwave down there.
That's it, and then we'll all starve to death. Everything we eat comes in on the barge, and then from the mainland.
Well, we can start eating the tourists.
Well, there won't be any more tourists. That'll be the problem.
No, they won't. No, it's a bad situation, and you know, if Claire and I had the wherewithal, we would be getting off this rock right now, because it just seems like the U.S. government, all they can think of is push the war, push the war, push the war, because they've gone down this agenda of world conquest so far. They can't turn around and go back, and they're absolutely convinced that if they can get into another world war, that we, the American people, are going to forget all about the crimes, corruption, the constitutional violations. We're going to forget about how terrible the economy has been managed, throw a snappy salute at the flag, and fling our babies onto the designated bayonets, because that's what happened the last 2 times. But it's a very, very different world, and I don't think it's going to work.
Those Russian nukes, first of all, they corkscrew going when they go up. So
they corkscrew really coming on back down. That's the hard part. Right now, America's ballistic missile defense system is obsolete in the face of the Russian and Chinese maneuverable warheads.
And the other thing to keep in mind is each one of these bombs is packed, and it's about, I don't know, I've heard them say that some of these would destroy half the state of New York. One bomb is big enough to do that, kill everything in half the state of New York. Perhaps I misread that.
Well, actually, there are the big city buster bombs, but the nuclear powers have moved away from those in the advent of much more accurate targeting. They're really focusing on much lower yield tactical weapons that destroy a limited area. The exception to that, of course, is China, which uses very, very large bombs because their accuracy isn't all that good. But the big city buster bombs, the megaton bombs, those may be in a warehouse someplace, but they're not in actual deployment right now. You can go to Wikipedia and get the current nuclear weapons deployed to the world's arsenals and what their yields are, and then you can go to the Nuke Map application, type in where the location you're worried about, which in this case is Honolulu, and see if any of those effects would reach you on Maui. The only one that has a chance of reaching you on Maui is the Chinese warhead, because it is a very, very big one. It will basically melt Oahu down into slag.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand that. It's scary. It's a scary situation, and it's all about, you're right, it's all about whose paper money we're going to use, because even if the Russians and Chinese have a gold currency, it's going to be a fractional reserve on.
Well, we don't.
All that gold is phony.
Well, we don't know. Actually, China just discovered a new gold field inside their own borders, something like an estimated 500 tons of gold that they found. I'm sure it's got, the New York Fed and the Bank of France and J.P. Morgan just drooling to get their hands on it. Anyway, James, the phone lines are filling up. I'm going to take a few more phone calls, then we're probably going to cut the phone lines off while I get some news done. Before we get to those new phone calls, though, apparently the USS Carl Vinson is finally arriving in the waters off of North Korea. It's being joined by some Japanese warships. They did have a bit of a whoopsie over the weekend when an FA-18 that was trying to land on the Carl Vinson had some kind of a problem. They're not saying exactly what it was. The pilot did eject safely, but the aircraft is a total loss. All right, getting on back to the phones here. Francis in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you. First off, a funny one, and then a little bit more serious for you. If Russia is so bad, it's ridiculous, then the politicians in the District of Criminals should not be either drinking either a white Russian or a black Russian. Now, that was a bad, funny one.
Okay.
Now on the yeah, I know that went over like a little balloon. Now, I know this is going to ruffle feathers. I know it's going to curl some toes. But as far as the whole issue about what Trump is doing and so forth ad nauseum, I think a lot of people need to realize one thing or remember one thing. Trump is only going in to be the CEO and allow Pence and whoever vetted him to run the White House and what's going on. And from what we've been gathering so far is that Pence has been doing just that, running around doing drum beating of drums of war.
Yes.
And being a very pushy individual and so forth. And whoever vetted him and presented him to Trump as a running mate, I would love to know, unless it was one of those big fortune, whatever, so-called rich elite or whatever, that did that, or an international banker for that matter. So this whole aspect, well, Trump is disappointing this way and this way and this way or whatever have you, but he did come through with this and this. you know what? That's all well and good, but you know something? When you have a running mate that's going back behind your back and pulling maneuvers, I have to agree Trump needs to get his act together. And it's not like he's going to pay attention to the everyday person or to his Twitter account or whatever millions of communication he supposedly has with the everyday person, because obviously such a Twitter account would be monitored by the alphabet soup group to begin with, whichever one you want to pick.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever someone goes into politics in D.C., guess what? I don't care if they were a politician to start with or not, or just an everyday person who happens to be really filthy rich. Once you get in there, well, you're good luck on trying to get your tail out of there and doing something for America, because it ain't going to float.
Well, at this point, I don't care why it happened, but we, the American people, are not getting the policies we voted for, is really what it comes on down to. We voted for an anti-war, anti-foreign intervention policy, and we're not getting it. And I don't even care about the reason anymore, whether it's just Trump was lying to us, or Pence is in control, or Trump is being blackmailed or threatened. At this point, I really don't care anymore. The end result is we, the American people, aren't getting the direction of this country that we voted for, and we've been robbed and cheated, is really what it comes down to.
Well, it's interesting you said that in that order, because, quite frankly, how about all of the above?
Okay, we can say all of the above. Now, what's really interesting about Pence is you're correct. He is really out there being visible, and that's unusual for vice presidents to do. Apparently, he's out there talking about how the U.S. is going to expand their military alliance with Japan. But while we see Donald Trump out there for the various photo ops and everything, Pence is almost acting like he already is the president. And that is very, very alarming. And maybe he is calling the shots in the Trump White House the way Dick Cheney did in W's White House.
Thank you. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going there at the end of the whole scenario. One, yes, Pence is sticking his face out there in the front compared to Cheney, but after all, Pence did make the comment long ago that if he ever happened to get into the White House, along with Trump or whoever, that he was planning on running his office like Cheney did. So it's like, oh my gosh, we're going to go through hell now. So it's like, well, people, you voted for this one party, and yet you got the dark side of the whole bag of tricks, so enjoy yourself.
All right, and on that note, Francis, we're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over to Kyle.
Have a good one.
Thank you. We're going to switch over to Kyle in Pennsylvania. Kyle, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I'm a little bit surprised at your reaction. If I would have told you 24 months ago that legal immigration would be down upwards of 70%, the destruction of the mainstream media would be essentially complete, you would have a secretary of, the head of EPA that is opposed to man-made global warming. You'd have an investigation into the effects of vaccines. You'd have a staunch Republican on the Supreme Court, and you'd have the destruction of the Clinton, basically Bush dynasty. I think that's a pretty good start for the first 100 days. I think the perspective needs to be. There's a lot of stuff I don't agree with.
I would argue that we haven't actually seen these results. I mean, right now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is out there saying he is still being muzzled on the corporate media. The corporate media is certainly in trouble in terms of its revenues, but it is not surrendering its job as the propaganda arm of the U.S. government. We're facing a potential government shutdown over whether Trump can really implement his border wall or not. And yes, I will concede in the area of immigration, he seems to be making great progress. But again, certainly in the most important foreign policy areas, Trump has absolutely reversed course. And I don't care how it came to be about. The fact that he did reverse course means the American people did not get the direction of government they voted for. And
everybody tests a new president. The world will always test a new president. He's within the first 100 days of his administration.
Well, I'm giving him an F. I'm giving him an F on this test. All right, a D minus.
Well, And I would also say that when you have a mainstream media that more of the population believes in Bigfoot than in their credibility, I don't care what they say, what mouthpiece they are. It's not being sold. It's not being bought by the public. They can say whatever they want. The only reason why they're still around
but Trump didn't do that. Hang on. Trump didn't do that. We in the independent media did that. The corporate media was in trouble long before Trump even declared to be president. And so I'm sorry, he doesn't get to take credit for that one.
I'm not going to say he could take credit for that, but I think that he's a great manifestation of the fact the mainstream media has been broken. If it wasn't for the destruction of the mainstream media, if it wasn't for us, and I don't want to focus this entirely on Trump, because it's not. I mean, you're absolutely right. We have done a dramatic amount of the legwork. It's been years of guys like you and other people out there spouting the truth.
Okay.
And as I said,
Kyle,
we are in a much better position today than 24 months ago.
I would debate that, but we have to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. John in Vancouver, welcome to the show. What is on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
Okay, great. I was wondering, you were aware of the film that came out in the early 60s called Dr. Strangelove, correct?
Oh, yes. One of my favorites.
Yeah, I've always had a question about it because it's never really fleshed out in the movie, but the premise of the movie is that the Russians build an atomic device, and what makes it so deadly is they encase the device in cobalt. Now, my question to you is that, and obviously it's so deadly and so bad that if one has ever exploded, even if it's a possible weapon, that it would kill everything on the planet. Is that just a fairy tale, or was that actually something that would be doable?
It's technically possible. I don't know that anybody has done it for the obvious problem. But what's really interesting is at the same time Dr. Strangelove came on out, there was another movie, a much more serious movie. Dr. Strangelove is obviously a comedy, but there was a serious movie called Failsafe that was basically about the president dealing with an accidental release of nuclear weapons. And the end of that one is that Moscow and New York are destroyed. And this is a theme that we have seen in movies time and time again. But you're basically, because the bombs don't have to be launched or transported, yes, what the Russians describe, their doomsday device, is theoretically possible. It's insane, but it's possible.
It is insane, and it's only something that somebody absolutely desperate or psychotic would use. But that leads me to my second question. I'll hang up after this. If that was something that was doable, and from what I understand, it's not a technically insurmountable problem to do that. Is that not something that would be like, I don't know, a dead man switch for somebody like, I'm not even saying Kim Il-jung is that kind of guy. Would that not be like the dead man switch that would just make a superpower back off small, still technically capable nuclear power?
Well, that was the rationale for the doomsday device in Dr. Strangelove, that the Soviet Union was about to announce it, and that would discourage anybody from taking action against them. In the context of the movie, though, it was being kept secret, so the U.S. didn't know of its existence at the time, and of course, the bombers went in to the Soviet Union because of a mechanical fault. And by the way, if you look at the real history of America's nuclear deterrent, there have been some close calls. There have been times when nuclear weapons have been lost, active armed nuclear weapons have been lost off of aircraft. If you remember the movie War Games, that's actually based on an incident that really happened. Now, there was no kid on the outside hacking on in, but at Cheyenne Mountain, somebody put an attack simulation tape on, didn't announce it was a simulation, and the control room came really, really close to launching missiles at the Soviet Union. So these things do unfortunately happen. The more complex you make a system, the greater the probability there's eventually going to be a goof.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, have you seen the movie The Bedford Incident?
Yes.
With Richard Widmark and Sidney Poitier. Same thing. You know, it's basically it's a game of almost at that level, it's a game of Russian roulette. I mean, do you really want to go that far? Do you really want to make that guy? And then my initial question is, what's to stop let's say North Korean, doing that, saying, hey, we've got one case in Cobalt. If you come after us, then we flick the switch, we're all dead.
Well, I think, again, technically it's possible. I don't know that North Korea has the sheer volume of weapons that would be needed to do this. Again, going back to Dr. Strangelove, they were talking about 100 different warheads buried underground over a vast stretch of territory, because if North Korea had a doomsday bomb and we knew where it was, it would be possible to go in and destroy it and confine the radiation to a very limited area.
Collective madness, Mike. Thank you for your show. I'm going to hang up.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to take another break for commercials. Come on back. We got one more phone call. Then we're going to close the phone lines because I have got news to share with all of you. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take one more phone call. Then we're going to close the lines while I get some news done. Fred in Iowa, aloha. Thank you for waiting so patiently. What is on your mind today?
Are you talking to Fred?
Yes, I'm talking to Fred.
Why in Christ's kingdom, and if people don't believe in the kingdom of Christ, it's useless to say, but why are sons and daughters joining the military, and why are the parents and grandparents telling the sons and daughters to join the military? The United States of America is the biggest terrorist state in the world. And all these rumors of wars. This is ridiculous about North Korea. They couldn't do nothing to us. But you rile up the troops, just like the mass media, alternative media, stupidly parrots the same damn thing. And they talk about Russia and China going together, and our alliance with Japan, and so on and so on. That keeps the people riled up, and they're so dang ignorant that they keep joining the military to go over and kill women and children in countries that never done a damn thing for us. Well, I don't want to hold you up, Mike, so I've said my piece. Think about it.
Well, I definitely will, and I don't think most young people don't want to enlist in the military. For a lot of young people, it's their only option. And again, I think back to this time, there used to be a Denny's down here at the bottom of the hill, right next to the military recruitment offices at the mall. And Claire and I were going to the Denny's, and there was a whole bunch of young kids in Air Force T-shirts, and we stopped to talk to them. And they had all enlisted, and they were waiting for the bus that was going to take them wherever Air Force enlistees wind up going. And they all basically said the same story. There were no jobs for them. There were no jobs, and they didn't. It was an economic draft. When the jobs get taken away for young people are left with two choices: join the military or be homeless. And I don't think
go over women and children so you can have a potato in your soup. That is stupid. That is insane. That is crazy. And our parents and grandparents, and I'm a great-grandfather, you tell our children to go over and kill people when our country is doing it. It is insanity.
Yes, it is. I agree with you. All right, well, listen, Fred, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here because I need to get back to some news. And obviously, news right now is coming out of Korea. According to a story out of the Express in Great Britain, the U.S. is preparing to evacuate 230,000 Americans from South Korea. And this apparently is coming direct from Donald Trump himself. And it's part of the drill called Courageous Channel. I don't know where they come up with these lame names. And supposedly the operation is set to take place in June and will prepare for the safe exit of around 230,000 Americans in the case of conflict. Now then, very alarming development. Apparently Wednesday, Donald Trump has invited the entire Senate to a briefing on Korea held at the White House. They don't even want to use the Capitol building because of all the people who leak. So apparently some momentous decision is coming on up. Wednesday. And we really need to take a look at this, because remember, the last time the United States went into North Korea, they didn't win that war. U.S. analysts are saying a new U.S. invasion of North Korea would cost 250,000 American casualties and more than $10 billion. Some estimates are $80 billion. And you know military spending could easily go over $100 billion and still not guarantee success. Now, here is an interesting development, and it may relate to this sudden meeting at the White House on Wednesday. The leading presidential candidate in South Korea is saying that if he does win the election, South Korea will take charge of its own defense against North Korea. They do not want U.S. interference, and that's partly because this candidate is in favor of the Sunshine Policy. He wants to reunify the Koreas. Now, as a result of this statement, this may be pushing the timetable. The U.S. may realize they've got to get the war on North Korea going before the South Korean elections, or they could lose the prime partner. Because nobody's going to buy a U.S. invasion of North Korea if South Korea is saying, hey, we're friends now. And it looks like everybody is trying to crank up the propaganda about everybody. There's a story. China's military just made chilling move Germans made in the 1930s. And apparently they're talking, this is coming out of Reuters, a massive reorganization by the Chinese military has many wondering if President Xi Jinping has wider designs in the Asian Pacific sphere. Here we go with the propaganda. We have to invade China. They want to seize the South China Sea Islands. They want to invade Japan again. They want to do this. They want to do that. They're building toward war with Russia and China. We are going to lose this one. Now, as you know, not too long ago, Bill O'Reilly had to step down from his position at Fox News. The official reason given was sexual harassment allegations, which are nothing new to Bill O'Reilly. He did get a $25 million severance package. They basically paid him $25 million to just shut up and go away. That's a good price. For $25 million, I'd shut up and go away. But apparently this was part of Rupert Murdoch's plan to try and get rid of conservatives at Fox News, which traditionally has been a more conservative outlet. And now Sean Hannity is under attack. He's being sued for sexual harassment. Same exact thing that drove Roger Ailes and Bill O'Reilly off the air. But he is suing back for defamation. And Sean Hannity's accuser, Debbie Schlussel, has just changed her story and said Sean never harassed her, she apologizes, and, you know, hope we can go on being friends, blah, 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 blah. Rachel Maddow, who I used to have a lot of respect for, on a segment of her show, the Rachel Maddow Show, went on out trying to claim that the widespread anti-socialist protests in Venezuela were actually against President Donald Trump. They're just using the footage and making things up. Remember what I said at the top of the show? All these riots over at Berkeley that we were told were about Donald Trump's tax returns. They weren't. They were about Berkeley's banning of Ann Coulter from speaking there. It was a free speech rally. So let's talk about the economy now. And basically, Bill Holter is out there saying central banks will destroy their own currency by doing what they do, creating more currency and credit. And the faster they run, the faster things are going to catch up with them. We'll be in Zimbabwe territory, carrying around paper notes that say $100 trillion. And the Federal Reserve, able to create money out of thin air, it's a legalized counterfeiting operation, is buying up assets to try and keep prices up. That's how the stock market is being rigged. The stock market is hideously overvalued, and that is dangerous. Article came out of Patriot Rising, 11 facts that prove the U.S. economy in 2017 is in far worse shape than it was in 2016. You need to read the article because these are all very alarming indicators. Apparently, Wells Fargo Bank has failed its second U.S. bankruptcy test in a row. So they're in serious, serious trouble. Bill Holter is out there saying, he's a financial expert, the U.S. government will default. the defenders of the dollar are in a panic and basically pointing out all this private central bank nonsense and all these investments, they're Ponzi schemes. Bill Holter says we will not get past 2018. Now, the hard part about predicting what's going to happen with the economy is that those in charge of the economy are free to change the rules at any time, and they have been. They changed the rules to try and draw it out, kick that can down the road. Up in Detroit, they're finally starting the water shutoffs on all those people who cannot afford to pay their water bills, and there are 18,000 people who are about to lose their tap water, which, if you consider the quality of tap water coming out of faucets these days, might not be an entirely bad thing. Concerns are being raised over in Spain about the Media Banco and whether it's fragile, clear risk of contagion, the same thing we are seeing sweeping the Italian bank. Story out of Investment Watch blog, billionaires are now terrified of a major correction this summer. UK retail falls at the fastest rate. 40% of Spanish children are living in poverty. Existing home sales surge in the bubble cities where hedge funds, speculation, and foreign investors are purchasing, but everywhere else it's locking up. The economies are locking up because all of the currency is gathered together around the money junkie. Another story out of 12160.info, and we've been saying this all along. It is a fear of bank runs and insolvency that is driving the IMF's newest proposal for a cash-free society. So that when the banks get in trouble, you're not allowed to remove your savings account from them. They'll just send it to another bank, who will then send it back. And it's just another holding action, another kick the can down the road. Because at heart, the problem is private central banks, by design, produce more debt than money with which to pay that debt until it has to crash. Even if it's linked all across the globe, the crash is coming. Now, oil stocks are in an extreme period of volatility, a lot of this having to do with whether nations that are part of OPEC are going to keep to their recent agreement, or some nations are going rogue, which is already happening. And so we're seeing predictions for oil price ranging from $42 a barrel up to $100 a barrel, and that's why oil prices are just bouncing all over the place. Story coming on out of Investment Watch blog, President Trump speaks the words we long to hear, massive tax cuts. Oh, it sounds wonderful, massive tax cuts. But for who? That's the important question. And according to a story coming out of Patriot Rising, Donald Trump is going to order corporate tax rates cut to 15%. And in the process, of course, it will incur another $2 trillion in extra debt. Who pays that debt? Eventually you do, or your children or your grandchildren. It's another way of stealing from the American people to hand cash to the bankers, to the corporations. Now, Donald Trump may be trying to replay Reagan's trickle-down theory, but the trickle-down theory didn't work. It was the same rationale with the Troubled Asset Relief Program in 2008. We're going to take away your money and give it to the banks so the banks can basically loan it back to you at interest, or they'll create jobs with the money, and it didn't happen. The CEOs just put the money in their pocket as added bonuses, and it didn't help. Right now, corporations are not investing in new labor. They're investing in automation. They're still offshoring jobs. They're still bringing in H-1B visas. And they don't seem to understand that if ordinary working Americans do not have any money, they're not going to be buying the products out of the store. And I don't understand why that common sense seems not to get through to the planners of the economy. Now, there is a company called Plastic, spelled without the C, P-L-A-S-T-C. It is a smart payment card that can store all of your credit card and debit card details in a single card. So instead of having a wallet with 5, 6, or 20 cards, they're all on this one card. And they started taking pre-orders back in 2014. Now, 3 years and countless shipment delays later, the company has thrown in the towel. They officially shut down on the 20th, and they're filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Now, according to Magnify Money, Plastic raised $9 million from 80,000 pre-orders. It wasn't and will not be able to fulfill any of them. And this may be a setback for the cashless society, but you need to keep your money under your control. The retail bubble has now burst. A record 8,640 stores are going to be closing this year that we know of, and there may be more to come. Another article, this one from Patriot Rising, talking about the phenomena. Why are so many millennials living with their parents instead of getting married and starting their own families? They don't have money. There are no high-paying jobs. They're trapped under usurious student loan debt. We're just walking wallets to the people running this country. All we're good for is what wealth we can give them or the new workers and soldiers we breed from them, and that's basically it. Now, Russia has added another huge pile of gold to their reserves in March. They're trading directly with China, and they're going to establish a gold-based currency for international trade, and I'm sure the other nations of the Shanghai Cooperative Organization, or BRICS, are going to want to get on board that. As I mentioned earlier in the show, China has just discovered a huge gold strike on their own territory, 500 tons of gold, and that is going to seriously, significantly shift gold prices as it starts being produced, being mined. Meanwhile, President Trump has gotten into a little bit of a tiff with Canada. It's almost like the movie Canadian Bacon. Are we going to go to war with Canada? And apparently what it has to do with is the fact that several dairy farms in Wisconsin are in trouble because the existing contracts they had with milk buyers, repackagers, processed food were canceled. And so Trump wanted these Wisconsin farmers to sell their milk into Canada. And Canada is blocking it, saying that they've got their dairy industry set up to supply Canadian needs, and they don't need to buy America's surplus, and they certainly resent being forced to buy America's surplus. And so we're starting to see a little bit of a trade war with Canada. So let's talk about immigration, refugees, migration. Story coming on out of Investment Watch blog. Overwhelmed U.S. deportation officers lose track of thousands of criminals. They're saying you could work 18 hours a day. You cannot get caught up. There are that many of them. This open borders idea is an absolute unmitigated disaster. And everybody knows it. We're going to take a break here for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we talk a lot about hate crime hoaxes, and they do seem to be an attention-getting device, and they're far more common than you might think. And so we're looking at this article out of Russia Today. An assistant professor at Indiana State University has been arrested for allegedly making false claims of anti-Muslim threats against him and reporting a made-up attack. The guy's name is Azhar Hussain, and he's been charged with obstruction of justice and harassment. And basically, the campus police were saying that Muslim students and faculty members and even some non-Muslims were sent threatening emails in March. The emails were filled with anti-Muslim sentiment, threats against the Muslim community. And Hussain reported that he was attacked as he was entering his office on March 24th. And apparently at the time, people nearby said they didn't hear anything, they didn't see anything. And it looks like this guy was concerned that he was going to lose his job, and so he decided to play for sympathy in an effort to hang on to his professorship. But I think he needs to be given the heave-ho right now. Turkey says it may suspend their migrant deal with the European Union. And basically, Turkey is trying to blackmail the EU. And saying that if the EU goes along with Turkey's new proposal, the deal will continue. Right now, they have about 3 million Syrian refugees in Turkey poised to enter Europe, unless some kind of an agreement is made. I have a better idea. Let's send them all back to Syria. Let's stop bombing Syria and send all the Syrian people back there. That's their home. That's where they want to be. Another article coming out of the Express in Great Britain. Somebody's been going over the numbers. You've been hearing about how the EU wants to talk about divorce payments from Great Britain following Brexit. And it turns out that without some kind of a deal where Great Britain will continue to pay into the European Union, the burden for keeping the EU afloat is going to fall on Germany, and it will cost billions. And that's really the motive for opposing Brexit. They want to keep the EU together. Germany certainly does not want to continue in the EU because they have been paying the lion's share of the costs for all the other EU economies. And they, too, have suffered at the hands of the refugees, along with Sweden and France and pretty much everybody else. Now, apparently, they're coming up on a showdown with Trump and the Congress, because, as you know, the government has run out of money and they need an emergency spending bill. And Donald Trump is saying that if it does not include funding for the border wall, he will not sign the budget deal. And apparently the Trump administration is already beginning preparations for a government shutdown. Now, if you remember the last government shutdown, what they will shut down are all the things you actually want and need from the government. And everything else that you could care less about is still going to keep on working. Plenty of money. No money for the national parks, no money for infrastructure, but always plenty of money for bombs, refugees, illegal immigrants. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 3. The phone lines are open again, 800-313-9443. We've got 2 callers already waiting on the line. Before we get to them, though, they've just had a pretty big earthquake just off Valparaiso, Chile, in the ocean there, and we're sort of under an alert here in Hawaii for a possible tsunami, and hopefully that'll firm up in the very near future. All righty, let's see. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I just returned from a wonderful country that has no military. The media, the politicians don't talk about the next country to be invaded. There's no John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and Maxine Waters. I was in Costa Rica, and now I'm back in the U.S., and I'm miserable. I want to say this. I was in Costa Rica when this whole missile strike happened, and I've been listening to your show. I was listening to it down there, and I don't care whether Trump was, if he was threatened, if he was blackmailed. He's become a figurehead. It's become a joke. Yes. And I'd have more respect for the man if he just resigned. Because, I heard a funny thing on Crosstalk. They said this is the first transgender presidency. Donald Trump has become Hillary Clinton.
Gee, I wonder where they heard that one from.
Yeah. Did you say it before?
I said it at the top of the show.
Okay, sorry. But he's become a figurehead. And I listened to some of your callers, and it seems like they're just grasping on to their hope that, Trump is the real deal. He's not. Get over it. The guy, he's a con man. I was conned. I admit it. And one good thing was it did show the deep state, that we have a deep state in this country. He's a con man. All he's interested in doing, according to Paul Craig Roberts, is sell things with his name on it and make deals with China. Apparently, he made a deal with China, a trademark deal. It's an excellent interview with Gerald Celente on Jeff Rance, and they go through a laundry list of Trump's betrayals. So the guy is he's part of the problem. He's not the solution. And then one other thing, Tom from Florida talks about, Trump is deporting all these guys from MS-13. Hey, where's the proof, Tom? I mean, who told you that? The government? The corporate, the mainstream media? How do we know these MS-13 guys who might be in league with the CIA? How do we know these guys are being deported?
No,
I don't believe
we
it.
really don't. And, just the other day there was a story saying that MS-13, their numbers are surging here in the United States. Part of it is the open borders. Part of it is they're recruiting within the inner cities, where they're finding all these very angry, disenfranchised people who are willing to sign on with a gang because they don't see any other possible avenue to any kind of a comfortable lifestyle. That's really where that comes from. Now, as far as Donald Trump is concerned, and again, I don't really care how it came about. I'm looking at the end result. I think Donald Trump originally meant well, but I think he has been co-opted by that deep state. It certainly appears that a lot of these policy decisions are being made by other people around him. He's unfortunately been, his White House is infiltrated with all these neocons, and we know how much the neocons love war as long as somebody else pays for them and dies in them. And that's really the problem right there. And I could be wrong, but I'm very disappointed in Donald Trump. And it may be because he was naive coming into Washington, D.C., which was my concern going all the way back to the original campaign.
Yeah, but Mike, I mean, we're told he's smart, he's intelligent. You know, he was a graduate of Penn. He's street smart. We hear that all the time from Robert David Steele. How could he be so naive? I mean, he plays the political game. He was involved in this game for decades. Didn't he know what he was getting into?
Rob, Donald Trump has played the business game, and yes, there's a little bit of politics in it, but the politics inside Washington, D.C. Is a whole different animal. It's ruthless, vicious. It involves assassination, blackmail. We're hearing rumors that apparently when Trump was down on Epstein's island, that they got video on him, which, if it were made public, would absolutely destroy his reputation. That could be what's going on. We're hearing another rumor that he's simply been told by the leadership of Congress, the war agenda will move forward. All you can decide is if you're going to remain president or not, because if you refuse to follow the war agenda, we're going to find some way to get rid of you. And there's already this attempt to file a new law that would change the definitions of the 25th Amendment to allow past presidents and vice presidents to pass judgment on the current president if they're fit for office, which is very dangerous because it basically means it gives a veto to somebody like an Obama over anybody who refuses to carry forward on his agenda. And the whole idea of having a new president every 4 or 8 years is to get new agendas and new thinking in there, not merely reinforce the status quo. But again, in the long run, it doesn't matter how it happened. What matters is that Trump has been somehow brought to heel to the war agenda. And it basically means, as John F. Kennedy said, peaceful revolution has been made impossible in this country, and that leaves a very, very ugly alternative.
Well, I just wanted to say this. I mean, he may have dealt in the business side of the political game, but, I mean, he has the objective example of JFK. I mean, does he believe the Warren Commission? I mean, it just makes me wonder about this guy. I mean, he had to know what he was getting into. He just, I don't know. And then I said way back a few months ago, Mike, that we live in the perfect dictatorship. And you're right, it's not the perfect dictatorship because more and more people are seeing it for what it is, but we live in a dictatorship nonetheless.
No question. No question about that at all. And, of course, as we like to say over at our online store on one of the coffee mugs, the fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it, and we seem to be getting into that particular phase. Again, I think the lesson we're taking out of the 2016 election is that it doesn't really matter who is in that Oval Office. The national policy is being dictated from outside. We, the American people, did not get the direction of the nation we voted for, and we have every right to say it's time for a cash for clunkers law for the government itself, to basically take our bloated, non-working, impossible-to-control government over to the junkyard, put it in a little cruncher, turn it into a steel coffee table, and we all get a $50,000 check to go out and buy a smaller, more efficient, more easy-to-control government.
Yeah, Mike, you may have said it, you and Claire, you may have said it in jest, who knows, you're seeking political asylum in Russia. I would take it in a second, and I would renounce my citizenship. I'm very close to renouncing my citizenship and moving to Costa Rica.
Well, again, Claire, the problem Claire and I have is we don't have the money to go anywhere, or we'd be on the mainland. But yeah, if some other less warlike government were to offer Claire and I asylum, we would seriously consider it.
All right, well, Mike, thank you so much. Thanks for all you do.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And before we take any more phone calls, we brought this issue up last week. It's from the realm of political correctness. And it's an article. It's coming out of LouRockwell.com. Transgenders threaten female sports. And they're starting to talk about all these athletic events that are being dominated by women who used to be men. And they've had the surgery and the hormone treatments, but they still have the extra muscle mass that men genetically have. Because if you test their DNA, they're still male. Doesn't matter what's been cut off or what's been altered with various chemicals in their DNA, they are still male. And they're talking about how these women who used to be men are starting to basically sweep these female sports. The real biological women can't compete. They can't keep up. If you want, let's have a third division, okay, for the transgenders. But it is not fair for a woman who used to be a man to be seen as competing on an equal footing with the real biological females. And this whole thing about gender, they're back out there trying to get you confused about what restroom you're going to use. Over on the Bill Nye show, he's out there saying sexuality is a spectrum. Just do what feels right. Harvard is telling their students gender can actually change from day to day. Now, I'm almost 65 years old, and not once in all that time have I ever been anything other than male. It just doesn't happen. All right, back to the phones. Rob in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. First off, I agree with you on that trans stuff. That they're still just trying to water down humanity to lose its history of what it was. And on the other gentleman before, talking about this country, and everybody thought that keeping Hillary out or getting Hillary in there was actually going to cause the final takeover of our country, but unfortunately what's coming to light is it was already taken over. It's just it's kind of like whose name's on the deed, That's really, it's just a dog and pony show. And I read a couple articles over the weekend, and I wanted to ask you to verify them. Trey Gowdy's two investigators were rumored to have been disappeared in Arkansas. They were going to investigate the Clinton Library and the residence there. Well, they apparently, according to one article today, they found their bodies in a shallow grave 100 miles away. I don't know. I haven't seen anything anywhere else, and I figure you're probably as good as I can get to verify something about Trey. And that he's also under federal marshals are protecting him and his family because of the death threat.
Well, unfortunately, I have not been able to find anything to support the story, and it all tracks back to a website I know puts out hoax news. And that is something in this war between the corporate media and the independent media. Somebody is paying to set up dozens and dozens of supposed news websites that pour out all kinds of junk story so the corporate media can point to them and say, see, you can't trust the independent media. Look, they're making up all these silly things here, and so you should come on back and watch our TV networks. It's called poisoning the well. It's a propaganda trick, and you need to be aware. And that's why if we follow the basic rules of honest journalism, multiple sources, we're going to stay out of trouble. And again, does it make sense? Look for what should be there and isn't. And obviously, if two of Trey Gowdy's investigators had gone missing and turned up dead, we would see Trey Gowdy on the news right now screaming about it.
Hopefully. And that's, again, I get back to how taken over we are. And I agree with you. That's why I was trying to find another source, and I couldn't. And, unfortunately, with what's going on in our country, we can't trust anything coming out of the government. And, we do have to prepare for that final, challenge that will be the ultimate survival challenge, I'll call it.
Yeah.
Once everything goes sideways. So, and unfortunately, we just don't know which way it's going to go. Is it going to be a nuke war? Is it going to be an EMP? Is it,
or an economic
really
collapse? Or an economic collapse.
Well,
personally, my best outcome is for the U.S. government in Washington, D.C. to collapse the way the Soviet Union did, because that is going to result in the fewest number of deaths.
Exactly. I completely agree. I say I'm begging and praying for a financial collapse. And the only one thing that I do see, and you may or may not agree, they keep talking about this being able to be sunk by Kim Jong-un. And they are going to need one wicked false flag to start this thing with whoever it is. And they could do that and blame it on the Iranians. And they could just incinerate one of our aircraft carriers. And next thing you know, it's off to the races. And they would have no shame at doing that.
No, they wouldn't. But frankly, if you were going to sacrifice a carrier, use the USS Ronald Reagan, because that thing is still radioactive from Fukushima. They don't need to sink an entire carrier. They could sink one of the auxiliaries and claim the captain heroically sacrificed himself in his ship to protect the carrier and blame it on North Korea. And don't forget, they tried to frame North Korea for sinking a South Korean ship some years ago. And they made a big deal about they hauled the torpedo up from the floor of the ocean, and here's a blueprint of the torpedo the North Koreans used, and as it turned out, anybody looking closely at it could see they were not the same weapon. So yeah, they could try that again, and they could set off a nuke someplace to get war with Iran going. But it looks to me like North Korea is going to be the next one they need to get going. And yeah, a false flag, firing a missile off saying, oh my goodness, it's North Korea, as much as sinking a ship and sacrificing it and saying it was North Korea, they're capable of doing anything.
Well, in case something ever does happen, Michael, I do thank you for your patriotic work that you've done. And none of us knows the day and time, but hopefully you and I and our children, get to make it through to the other side to see the restart of a real country again, a real world. That's all I have to say. I mean, it's just very bothersome with 4 young daughters, and all they are looking forward to is their life and families, and I'm sitting here in the background watching the piece of the puzzle fall into place that's going to stop that. So it just turns my stomach.
Yeah, I understand. I come from a family, in fact, I'm living right now in a neighborhood where there's lots and lots of new little children, and, I keep looking up at them and saying, what a horrible, horrible world we are leaving to these children to have to grow up into. And it's ugly out there. Anyway, Rob, I'm going to let you go here. We're going to take another phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I got a couple things I wanted to point out. I know you already talked about Korea talking about taking control of its own defense.
That's the leading presidential candidate saying that.
Yeah, you know what? That signals. Remember, Turkey is basically out of our orbit. They've just announced that they want to buy the S-400s. The Philippines, Duterte is trying to chart a course that's his own course and not the U.S. And now you see that ISIS is making attacks in the Philippines.
Yes.
And also the other day, today maybe, a former Israeli defense minister admitted that Israel and ISIS are allies and have been. So there's a whole lot of things happening. People are leaving our orbit. Our empire is just collapsing, Mike.
Yeah, it really is. They're leaving our orbit economically, militarily, and unfortunately, I think that has only encouraged the war hawks to just hit that accelerator and just try and ram this war agenda through as quickly as they can, because they know opposition to all of the war is continuing to build, not just in the people of the United States, but the people all over the world.
If Mike, if Marie Le Pen wins in France, it's like totally over. There goes NATO. There's a whole lot of things that will end then.
Well, I'm expecting there to be massive election fraud in the second round French elections. Apparently, a lot of people thought that Fillon was going to displace Le Pen for that second slot, and he didn't. It was a very poor showing. But we'll see what happens 2 weeks from now. But just like we saw up in Norway, like we saw with Brexit, like we saw with Nigel Farage, the European Union is not above rigging elections to keep the sovereigntists, the populists, the nationalists out of power.
One more thing, Mike. I know you talked about it last week, but when Trump's position on Iran, saying against the Iran nuclear deal, and where he came out and said, well, they're complying. First of all, they're not complying. But then he said, oh, they are complying, but not with the spirit. It's like they're living up to the agreement, but they're just not smiling when they do it or something.
It is that absurd.
It's ridiculous. How's anybody ever going to strike a deal with us?
They'd be idiots to do so. I mean, look at all the deals the U.S. government is breaking with everybody all over the world. Anybody who trusts the United States right now it shouldn't be holding office.
We are completely untrustworthy.
Our government is completely untrustworthy. You're trustworthy, I'm trustworthy. Ordinary Americans are decent, ethical, moral people. It is the government that is the problem. And I got chastised by another caller saying it's time to establish a big black line between what the government is doing and what the American people are doing, because we shouldn't conflate the two. And that's absolutely true. It's the government that's the issue, not the American people. We have to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Peter, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Finishing up with the political correctness theme. And we talked about this morning on the Richie Allen Show. Oxford University has come on out declaring that avoiding making eye contact or asking where someone is from are signs of racism. No, they aren't. Sometimes when I'm thinking, I don't make eye contact with anybody. I just sort of watch the ground in front of me. And people making conversation will just say, where are you from? I'm originally from Boston. It's not racist to say that. But they're really pushing this PC nonsense as hard as they can. All right, going on back to the phones. Glenn in Philadelphia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hey, you're really onto something. I think an asylum would be like the perfect place for you in any country.
Well,
not so much Claire, though.
Well, come on. I'm not leaving without her. Don't be ridiculous.
I'm finding it hard to believe that they're turning you away. I would just.
We haven't actually asked anybody. It was just an off-the-cuff comment the other day. Although we've always wanted to see the Hermitage. And I'm sure I could be of benefit to Russia's motion picture industry, because I'm up to date on the latest CGI stuff. But it was just an off-the-cuff comment. We haven't actually applied to anybody for asylum. Frankly, if we can get the money, we do want to get back to the mainland before we have a mushroom cloud nicely framed in my office window here.
No. I didn't say asylum. I said an asylum. Anyway, but there's...
Oh, I see. I didn't get the joke. I didn't get the joke. Okay.
But not so much Claire.
Well, they can't lock me up, but if I was already in, I'd have a heck of a time getting back out.
Exactly. Hey, no kidding. I've worked in such facilities, and you make sure you do not leave your ID on the other side of the door.
When I was younger and I was a magician, I actually volunteered at a mental hospital, go out there and do balloon animals and magic shows and everything. So I got to see and work with a lot of those people, and some of them, very clearly damaged individuals, and I felt really sorry for them. And
others can do quite well, and then there's unfortunately the recidivism where the people do better inside and then go out. It's family support structure is huge. Whether or not they have supports outside makes a big difference. But I wanted to say something about dictatorship. I'm going to respectfully disagree about the idea of dictatorship. I'm going to say it's worse than that. It's totalitarian oligarchy.
Okay,
because
I'll go with that.
The charismatic, the leaders come and go. The institutions that are being the puppet masters continue, and nobody even knows their names a lot of times, or their names are less known,
Well, Abraham Lincoln warned us that the creation of a corporation was essentially creating an immortal entity that could never die. All it could do was continue to acquire wealth until that wealth became a threat to the governing principles of the nation. And Lincoln certainly had that one right.
Absolutely. One last thing before I go. Anybody said anything about potential for ongoing problems with the Oroville Dam as the spring-summer thaw continues?
Yeah, there's been some concern expressed about that, and all they can do is wait and see. There really isn't much of anything that they can do. They're trying to repair as much of the dam as possible before the spring thaw, which thankfully is coming late and gives them a little bit more time. But again, Oroville is hardly the only dam in the United States that has been suffering from neglect. And yeah, we could see some major problems this spring.
Yeah, exactly. Just curious. All right, thank you, Mike. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to start with Chuck in Texas. Chuck, I'm probably going to have to take you through the next commercial break. What is on your mind?
Well, back to the poisoning the well. There's another one out there being spread around the Internet about Trey Gowdy. There's this guy that was supposedly died of a heart attack, blah, blah, blah. Johnston Wilson McGill.
Mm-hmm.
And he supposedly died before, he could, the day before he was supposed to testify. It's a total bogus story. The man doesn't even exist. I tried to find him on the Internet.
Yeah, there's a lot of that out there. Yeah, they're trying to junk up the independent media with stories that can be easily discredited as an attack on our credibility. So we have to be extraordinarily careful and think these things through. All right, Chuck, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. Another phone call when we come on back, and then we're going to close the lines and do some more news. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the lines for a while. Mike in Maryland, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, if you haven't heard about it, I thought I'd bring your attention to Operation Gotham Shield. The U.S. government to simulate nuclear blast over Manhattan. Have you heard about that?
Oh, yeah. In fact, we've had a couple of articles about it up at whatreallyhappened.com. And obviously a lot of people are very concerned about the fact that every time there's been a false flag attack of some kind, there's usually a drill of some kind in parallel with it to mask, the obvious pre-preparation that has to go into it. There was a FEMA drill in New York the night before 9/11. There was a security drill going on in Boston ahead of the marathon bombing. The same thing over at London during the 7/7/2 bombing. And so a lot of people are wondering, especially with this rush to war and this need for a horrendous false flag, is this another potential setup? And what is really interesting is the size of the detonation they're planning for, 10 kilotons, happens to match exactly the largest weapon North Korea has tested to date. The drill is not using the yields of weapons from Russia or China. And of course, whatever Iran is going to be accused of having, nobody has any idea what yield would be there as well. But it's very, very concerning that they're going to use New York again, potentially for another false flag. Those poor New Yorkers have suffered enough.
Well, and there's a couple of short paragraphs, but on April 8th, this is from Zero Hedge, which I think is a reliable source.
Yes.
On April 18th through May 5th, state, local, and federal organizations alike are planning for Operation Gotham Shield, major nuclear detonation drill. During this exercise, 4 nuclear devices, 2 of which are rendered quote-unquote safe during the U.S. Department of Defense Vital Archer exercise, and 1 successful 10-kiloton detonation in the New York City, New Jersey area, along with 1 smaller detonation on the U.S.-Canadian border, are to take place. And you got 10 government agencies involved in this exercise. So, the more people know about it, the less likely it is it'll go hot. But you just never know these days.
No, you don't really know. And again, we need to remember that when the Nuclear Emergency Search Team was doing their baseline maps over New York, they discovered that the Israeli embassy there is radioactive. It's a hotspot. And, of course, Israel won't explain and will not allow inspections. It's sovereign Israeli territory. But if you go back and you look at the history of Israel's procurement of nuclear weapons, some of their first-generation uranium fission bombs were built with material smuggled out of the United States from a company called NUMEC, which was eventually shut down because they kept missing uranium. They were losing uranium all over the place. And it would have been very easy for Israel to smuggle only some of that uranium back to Israel for the bombs and keep enough in the U.S. for a single device. for use in the future, because for a uranium fission bomb, it's actually very easy to build one. It's basically a pipe with two subcritical masses of uranium at each end. You slap them together, it goes bang. That's the secret of the uranium fission bomb. The hard part is getting the fissionables, and we know Israel has that.
Yeah, I guess time will tell. You know, hopefully we'll skate by this one. This doesn't do much for my heart condition, you know. But the good news, though, I heard that Target, because of their ridiculous transgender bathroom stand, I think it lost $15 billion last year. Is that true?
They lost a lot. I don't know the exact number, but it was a major, major hit. And I think the board of directors ought to think about voting their CEO out for this ridiculous mixing of retail with political. But it has cost Target huge numbers of customers. People aren't going there. They don't feel that they can go to the restroom in safety. And we saw Starbucks took a major hit because of some of their policies. Yeah, I'm kind of glad it happened. I don't know the exact number. But I think these retail corporations need to understand their business is retail, not trying to be part of the propaganda apparatus to mold the public opinion. It certainly backfired. People did not buy into this idea that a guy who claims he's a woman inside should be able to go into the ladies' restroom and or shower room and all the rest of that. That did not work.
Hey, thanks for taking the call. I'll get up there and let's get back to your good show. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much here. And we're going to close the phone lines probably for the rest of the show here because I've got a bunch of stuff to talk about. Now, interestingly enough, in the first week of April, the DEA was being questioned by a House Judiciary Committee about exactly how they're trying to keep drugs off the street. And the DEA admitted that they're actually having some of their informants sell drugs on the streets. The excuse is that they're trying to find the bigger fish. Well, they're going in the wrong direction because the bigger fish are upstream, not on the street level. But maybe somebody in the DEA is working with the CIA to get the drugs back out there onto the street, because when you want to destabilize a country, the best way to do it is to get them addicted to drugs. The British, I don't know if they intended to do this or not, but when the British won their war with China over their right to sell opium to the Chinese people, it eventually led to the collapse of the imperial government and the rise of communism. We know how well that fast and furious gun walking thing worked out as well. Now, Tesla is recalling most of the cars it sold last year. It's a voluntary recall of 53,000 vehicles out of a total of 76,000 that were sold. It's a huge fraction. Now, it's a minor issue. Apparently, there is a defective part in the parking brake that could keep the brake from releasing. And so the recall is basically go on in and they're going to install a new part in the parking brake so you can safely release it. So it's low key, but if you have a Tesla, you're probably going to get a recall notice on that. Speaking of electric cars, the numbers are starting to come on in on all these federal subsidies for corn, ethanol, and other corn-based biofuels. The numbers really aren't looking very good. Basically, after 30 years of federal backing, corn ethanol subsidies scattered throughout the federal tax code and Farm Bill energy title should be eliminated because they were supposed to achieve energy independence, but they really didn't work on out. Because, first of all, production of corn ethanol is not carbon neutral when you include the CO2 produced during the processing of the corn into the ethanol. The other problem is that ethanol has much less energy than an equivalent amount of gasoline. So you have to buy and burn more of it to accomplish the same amount of work with your motor vehicle or tractor or truck or forklift or whatever you're putting it in. And finally, for older cars, ethanol is dissolving the fuel systems. The soft components of the fuel systems, they're not designed to work with ethanol. The newer flex fuel cars will, but if you have an older car like we do, we have to go to a special gas station that will sell ethanol-free fuel. And that's where we get our car filled up. Now then, here's an interesting little article. This is coming out of the New Zealand Herald. And it's talking about how New Zealand scientists have helped discover incredible new submarine volcanoes in the Pacific Ocean, some of them rising up to 2.5 kilometers from the sea floor. And the discoveries were made by a team of international scientists who've just returned from a 6-week voyage probing the volcanic chematic arc around 1,000 kilometers northwest of the North Island. This is the area where the El Nino current emerges. And it emerges as a point source and then spreads as it flows to the east until it hits the Americas. And it underscores something I've been saying about all these claims from the carbon Nazis about how we're warming the ocean and the sea levels are going to rise. Nobody knows how many active volcanoes and thermal vents are on the floors of the ocean. And unless you have that and are able to subtract out the heat added to the oceans by geothermal activity, then you have nothing but a wild guess as to what the human contribution is. You haven't corrected for all available factors. Let's talk about what's going on here in Hawaii. As you probably are aware, I've been talking for a long time about this light rail project we have here. It is a boondoggle with a capital Boon. And basically this entire rail system reaches a total of 20 miles, which is along the south shore of Oahu, from Honolulu out to Ko'olina, where the Disney Resort is. The initial estimate for cost was $5.28 billion. It is now estimated by the time it's done, it will run $10 billion or $500 million per mile, the most expensive track in the world. Now, this whole light rail was sold on the idea that it would reduce the current level of traffic congestion dramatically. However, the final environmental impact statement concluded that rail would reduce traffic congestion by less than 2%, and that traffic congestion will be worse in the future with the rail than what it is today without the rail. Currently, Honolulu does not have the funds to complete the 20-mile system. They're at least $3 billion short and 6 years behind schedule. And how did this happen? Well, do you remember the Alaska's infamous Bridge to Nowhere, part of Sarah Palin's legacy? Because the project was driven more by politics than by objective engineering and planning. Our former governor, Cayetano, is out there telling Trump, you might as well cancel the federal rail funding. This is never going to get finished. And remember, we've already talked about how they're going to have to replace all of the rail cars they bought because of a design defect. The frames are already cracking, and they haven't even carried passengers yet. These cars are all built with aluminum. They have 4 extruded aluminum I-beams that run lengthwise, around which the rest of the car is built, and they're discovering cracks in them. The little insulator pads on which the tracks actually rest are not bearing the load. They're already having to be replaced along the first 11 miles of the track. And they discovered that the columns that will hold up the actual stations are not up to the task. The contract for those columns and braces was signed before they really understood just how heavy those stations were going to be. Now they're going to have to go back and refit those. If we didn't have enough problems there, apparently a lot of veterans are very upset over the new Hawaii Veterans Affairs chief. And basically it's Jennifer Gutowski, and they don't think she's going to be a person to fix all of the problems that we're dealing with in the VA affair, because apparently she was caught trying to falsify the medical wait times and conceal 13 deaths when she was in charge of Arizona. It is a raw deal for our serving veterans, whether you agree with the wars or not, and I certainly do not. We as a nation do owe a debt to those who put on the uniform, keep their oaths, keep their promises, and suffer greatly because of it. And the attitude of the government seems to be just put them on hold until they die. They're costing us too much money. Now, Bill Gates, who apparently is already lobbying Donald Trump to drop the Vaccine Safety Commission, is warning that terrorists could weaponize smallpox. Well, actually, that's already been done. The U.S. and other countries have already weaponized smallpox. But apparently Gates is out there ramping up the fear to try and sell us all smallpox vaccine. Now then, apparently a Romanian spammer is in part behind a sudden surge in fake Twitter followers in recent weeks. And what it is most Twitter accounts, some of their followers are going to be fakes, and they exist to simply dump porn ads and other things onto the various Twitter feeds. And Twitter doesn't seem to want to do anything about it, but they've tracked this down to this Romanian spammer who's doing this. Now, a little bit of good news, and you're going to have to know what you're doing to use this. But over in Computer World, they're reporting on how Luke Jennings of security firm Countercept has written a Python script that will test for NSA spyware. They're looking at all of this Vault 7 leaks coming on out from WikiLeaks, and they've written a script that will test your computer for NSA spyware. And it's currently estimated that the NSA has spyware on at least 100,000 computers here in the United States of America. But it does take some programming skill to use, some familiarity with Python. If you don't know what you're doing, then you probably need to make friends with a geek somewhere. Up in Canada, the Public Health Agency has confirmed 27 cases of E. coli 0121 infections across 5 Canadian provinces since November of last year. They're linked to flour produced by Ardent Mills Canada. And 7 of the outbreak victims were hospitalized but are recovering. No deaths have been reported. Now, E. coli 0121 is a Shiga toxin-producing strain of E. coli, and it has been responsible for outbreaks associated with flour, frozen foods, and raw clover sprouts. So if you're up there in Canada, be aware that I presume there is a recall for these various products from Ardent Mills. Check with your supermarket management, make sure that you're getting the good stuff here. Now, let's get on back to vaccines here. A lot of people are congratulating Fox News for actually having an open discussion on the questions of vaccines. Remember, we were talking about how Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was interviewed on Fox News, and he said, this is only the second time in 10 years I've been allowed to talk about this on TV, which shows you the monetary and political might of the vaccine industry. And there is a question. Unfortunately, corporate media is never going to deal with it. They are heavily dependent on advertising from the pharmaceutical companies. But apparently, up in Scandinavia, they've done another study in which they're showing that infants given the DTP vaccine are 5 to 10 times more susceptible to dying in what is loosely called sudden infant death syndrome. So there's very clearly a connection there. All right, we're going to take a break. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And a listener just sent in a confirmation that Target did lose $15 billion over this transgender bathroom nonsense. You know, something has occurred to me. I don't know how universal this is, but at our shopping mall down at the bottom of the hill, the restrooms come in threes. There's the male, there's the female, and then there's the so-called family restroom, which is non-gender. And people are confused about what they are. They could just use that one, I think. Anyway, getting on back to vaccines here. Story that came out of Ben Swan, and it's a bit of a flashback, but he was looking at CDC corruption following the revelation that the CDC's own vaccine autism study was a fraud. The scientist in charge came on out and said, we cherry-picked the data. This is now being backed up by David Newberry, who's the former CDC chief of the immunization branch 45 years, who's basically out there saying that early on, the CDC studied the links between vaccines and autism, and every time they found a link, they would change the experimental protocol. to hide the link, and they did it, in his estimation, 17 different times, where they were checking to see if there was a link between vaccines and autism. They kept finding it. They kept changing the experimental protocol. And finally, William Shatner, who is not really an anti-vaxxer, but apparently came on out and said that, you know, there is a legitimate question that should be asked, at which point vaccine bullies, if you will, jumped all over him on social media. I think we should set phasers to punch in the face. Now, thousands are suing Merck for their shingles vaccine, Zostavax, because it's actually causing shingles. It's another case of a vaccine that's actually causing the illness it's supposed to protect you from. But it makes money, and money is good in the United States. Everybody is so desperate for money, they're willing to do almost anything. Now the studies come on out showing that statin side effects outweigh its benefits. This is Professor Sharif Sultan, president of the International Society for Vascular Surgery. He says people are taking this drug to prevent a problem, and they're creating a disaster. And here is where the profit motive shows up again. The London Times recently revealed that one of the world's leading drug companies created artificial shortages by destroying supplies of life-saving cancer drugs in order to drive the price up. Oh, we have to charge you this much. There's a shortage out there. Where'd the shortage come from? Well, we were just pouring it down the sinks. All driven by the money. And by the way, over in ArsTechnica.com, we have this article. 107 cancer papers have now been retracted due to peer review fraud. This is from the journal Tumor Biology. And they discovered that the authors of these papers faked the peer review process. There's our music. Time for me to get on out of here and do the Jim Goddard Show. We will be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Please take what you learn here, share it with everyone that you know. We're in a fight to head off World War III. We're in a fight to protect the health and lives of our children from this out-of-control medical monster. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.